each style represents to you. So we got Doc Flamingo. As always, who are you? What content do you create? And what is your tabletop RPG experience? And you're muted. So apparently you weren't the one doing the giggling.
How
there
about
you
now?
go.
Oh, okay. My cat ate my volume control, so
always the cat's fault. Dog ate my homework.
So, Doc Flamingo, game designer. I have a bunch of stuff up on Drive-Thru, which is in the link. It's all also available print on demand on Amazon. I started gaming in 1980 at the age of 11.
Wow.
A bunch of older guys who I badgered into letting me play with them, and start out with D&D, of course, and then like everyone in the 80s, as soon as a new game came out, we played that. And I fell out of the hobby after about 20 years and came back about 4 years ago now. Been playing again, making new games.
Came back and created your own game. Wow. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, let's kick this off here. So, Doc, when you compare what's commonly termed as old school play to modern play styles, how do you define each in terms of concepts such as rules focus, adventure design, game master authority, player initiative, and the kinds of character development you expect at the table?
Well, I'm actually kind of the camp that this stuff is mostly in style more than mechanics, although, I mean, there's definitely certain things that are more common. For instance, old school tends to be much more rules light. There's a lot of like DIY going on, kind of make things up on the fly. Very fast character creation because the games tend to be hyper deadly. You're kind of expected to burn through characters. The rulings over rules, although I'm very much I like having a rule for everything in advance, but that's just me. Exploration is a big focus of it. They tend more towards the sandbox than I think a lot of newer games do. They would tend to have very more implied settings than included ones, although a lot of settings were put out for them. Combat was much more of a last resort kind of situation. You wanted to avoid it where possible because they were deadly, whereas now games are very focused on combat, which is one of the reasons people were very down on the XP gold for XP thing, but I think they didn't realize that was a big control from keeping it from running to a combat simulation. There wasn't a big focus on balance. That really wasn't a thing. You were meant to encounter things that you couldn't deal with. The whole idea was to know when to avoid that. And basically it wanted to reward cleverness over prowess. The focus was on the players, what the player did, not so much as what the character was capable of. And new school, I mean, it's kind of all over the place. It's just kind of not those things. It was really how I would have to define it. Because we're all over the place with what's coming out in games now. I think it really is a kind of a dichotomy there. It's just kind of this way or any other. And I think also, and I'll start criticizing them right off the bat, I think the OSR crowd needs to give up on D&D. At least
give up on what?
On D&D as its end all be all. I think a huge part of it is just this is the game we played back in the day, and to hell with everything else. And I don't want to completely crap all over D&D. I loved it. It was my first game, but I think there's this kind of pigmentedness that nothing else is acceptable. You can't move on at all. That crowd kind of needs to give up on, although maybe we're just too old now. Those clouds ain't going to yell at themselves after all.
Well, I've got a lot of clouds that are angry at me because they scream back. There was actually, I had just a quick little follow-up, and I don't remember what it is now, so I'll let these guys jump in until I can jog my memory. I know what I was going to say. Can you give a quick example of a difference that you see without diving so much into like what's going to come up in the other segments, but like the whole player first concept, like what that means and kind of what's got you a little cross, is that the word I want to use, in terms, because you said it's kind of a mess the way more modern gaming is. Can you explain that just a touch more?
Well, when I say mess, I don't mean that necessarily as a criticism, unless we're talking about GURPS. But had to get my GURPS dig in. No, I think it's just all over the place. I mean, there's it's branched out so much. There's so many different kinds of people playing different games that you can't really. I think it's kind of a losing battle to try to just define what's new. I think it's the question of the original versus whatever else is going on. So I think it's very difficult to define that. But for instance, like regarding like the idea of player agency and putting the characters first. The original games were about you, the person playing, figuring out clever ways to like deal with the encounter that was orders of magnitude too powerful for you to overcome by force. Whereas now it's more like trying to be a movie or a novel, or like you're meant to be a hero, you're meant to be able to overcome everything. And that wasn't the assumption back then. The idea was, no, you're nobody. You're probably not going to live through this. You're probably going to burn through 6 or 7 characters before you get somebody to like a fairly stable position, like at 5th or 6th level. So it was about playing the game as a player, as opposed to this is the character and let's learn about their story. Like first, I mean, a lot of the groups I played with, people wouldn't name their characters unless they made it to 5th level. Because I mean, what was the point, really? Or it's like, okay, this is Bob 5. We'll think of something better if he survives a while. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that D&D was, in a lot of ways, a war game first. It was a war game that they welded this new idea onto, and it developed very slowly. Like I remember when people first started encountering people who like would talk in character, there was a lot of eye rolling. Like, oh, you're one of these guys. And it wasn't
Yes, I was around for that.
And
a lot of eyes were rolled at me.
Yeah, it wasn't that they didn't take the game seriously. It's just that was like, what are you doing? Because it was coming from the wargamer mentality. It was a game. It wasn't this. You weren't like acting. You weren't trying to achieve immersion. So, I mean, I think that's a big part of the stumbling block of the people who approach it from it being a game versus kind of, and I don't mean to use this as a depreciatory, but people see it as more of a theater kind of experience now, like a character exploration. I think that's the main thing I think I would define new school kind of play as. That's, I think, the common thread, that it's all about the character as opposed to the player.
I'm going to be a bad host because I'm sure these guys want to jump in here, but I have to ask this question. Do you think that the Hickman Revolution had a part to play in that as well?
It had a part. I would put most of the blame, and I will call it blame in this case, on the Foundry, which I thought was just an absolutely toxic hellhole of these guys who are like, no, we are going to reinvent. And I think that's where a lot of this hostility comes from originally. I think it took root in that soil. This whole, we're going to redefine everything, and this is the way to do it. And not all the ideas were bad, but this weird elitism took root there, and I think is still with us.
Okay.
And that's where I'd say the big split really started forming, where people started dividing up into camps. And this was the earlier days of the internet, where it was all message boards and stuff. So I mean, those of us who were around for that remember what a just hellscape that could be sometimes.
Well, so I'm not interrupting you. Sean, Dean, if you guys want to jump in on that conversation, go ahead.
It's like Doc stole my notes and said everything I wanted to say. I'll just tune out now. Pretty much everything that Doc said is on point. I mean, for me, I boil it down to: are you playing for the game, or are you playing for the experience, the cinematic experience? And that for me is the demarcation point, where if we're coming down to play the game, let the system do the heavy lifting, and we just kind of see what happens when people interact with the scenario and the system. The DM is an adjudicator, not a storyteller. That skews to old school for me. I generally prefer that, but I've also got the I like when hammy actors play their roles and get into character. For me, the cutoff point is when DMs or GMs, if you're not doing a D&D thing, feel the need to take control of the story to either save players or to get the plot points that they've already predetermined. Once you do that, you've kind of lost me. You've taken away from the game. Whereas if you can simply adjudicate the scenarios and play out what happens, even if it's not ideal or not even convenient, and that's the fun for the DM too, is improvising your way through these situations that you weren't prepared for. Then you're playing old school. You're playing or enough of old school where it's still a game and it's still fun. That's where I come from on that point of view.
Yeah, I think having grown up with old school, having played sort of basic D&D, bit of first, then moving on to second, I think I was at the transition between old school, where the rules, the DM, they decided what happened. They were the adjudicator. And I remember being on some pretty bad tables where either the XP was non-existent and you spent months at first level struggling, or you just got thrown. The DM would roll dice and say, right, you're your second level, but he has 3 basilisks, and just see how you squirm and how you do.
Yeah,
and for me it was exactly. For me, it was a frustrating experience. As a player, you're at the whim of the DM's wishes, and I know you're going to have tables where the DM is absolutely fantastic and they're the adjudicator, and you have great hex crawls, you get into those dungeons, it's a fantastic game. But more often than not, in Wales, where I started role playing, a lot of the tables were terrible. Then second edition came along and things started to change, and your character had proficiencies. My God, skills, at the beginning of skills. And your character started to take center stage a little bit more. It was still dangerous. Your 1 dice roll, 1 failed saving throw, and you could be wiping out your character, and then you're back to creation. Creation took a little bit longer, but it was still quite a straightforward process. But I think, I love old school, but I also love building a story. And the thing I found most frustrating, and I don't know what the solution is, and maybe it is horses for courses, and I'm not saying either route is wrong or what one's better than the other. I'm not going to say, your way of playing is wrong, because we all have what we want to take out of this hobby. But I found it incredibly frustrating to have a character, to have developed that character to a point, and then to lose it in what I consider to be quite an unfair way. 1 dice roll, it comes lower than a 15, which is my saving throw, and my character dies to poison. And then you're back to square one. You're then thinking up another character, thinking up another. Yeah. And I saw a shift in the hobby where I was, where things began to become more story driven. There were a lot of books coming out at the time. One of the first adventures I played in was Fate of Istus, and it was an incredibly story driven. It was all about trying to save Greyhawk and doing these tests, and it was great. Then they had the Howl from the North and other modules like that sort of being run. Ravenloft's a great one. Talk about a scary environment. And then Planescape came along, one of my favorite settings, and that was again.
It's a dagger to the heart.
I know. But again, that was putting players in the center, because you became part of a society, and that society, you sort of brought your views together, and the way the game was run, it wasn't random dungeons or hex crawls and stuff. All of a sudden, stories became that much more important. But when it comes to old school, we talked about elitism, and this is to you, Doc. It's not the elitism, but how would you deal with, you're at a table, you're doing old school, but you got a DM who's supposed to be the adjudicator, but they're going out of their way to either adjudicate against everything you do, or to make your enjoyment, and I hate to use that term, but your enjoyment of the game that much more difficult, because everything you do, or every time you attempt to avoid a combat or to gain treasure, it's always been thwarted. What would you do in that situation?
Well, this is something, and I think this is where a lot of the changes in tone come from, because when these games first started coming out, the people who were playing them were older than like the kids that like us when we got into it. We were an anomaly in the hobby.
Yeah.
So these were, and game masters were originally started showing up in the miniatures war games as basically adjudicators, and they were generally that they were part of a club of experienced people who've been playing for years. They were usually elected by the clubs, so these were really experienced people who knew how to be impartial. And then when all these new people started coming in, uh, it didn't like have that experience, and it created difficulties that I think they didn't foresee originally. Because, you know, these guys had been doing, this was their thing they had been doing their whole life. They're mostly in their like 30s and 40s at this point, the guys who are creating them. And all of a sudden these kids start coming in. Like, for instance, I remember I started reading Dragon during the Roger Moore period when he was the editor. And I remember reading some of his articles, like, this is a hostile guy. I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to play in one of his games. He's like, screw the players.
Yeah.
But, and I think looking back at that now, I don't think I'd probably interpret it that way now. I think it was just more be firm. But I was playing with younger people too, for the most part, after I left that initial group. And there was like craziness because people didn't have the experience. They were just kind of winging it. And it's like, no, the table said it's 100 bugbears. So you got to find 100 bugbears. Yeah. So I think a lot of that is why, like, especially when you get into second edition, a lot of these, the emphasis changed to accommodate the fact that you were dealing with novices starting out with this and much younger people, as opposed to where it originally formed. So I think that's where where the momentum started shifting, because they were having to react to an actual problem that was coming up in the hobby.
Yeah, I was probably one of those younger players. I started, how old was I? Yeah, 17 when I started playing D&D. Before that, I lived in Africa. It wasn't really heard of. The solo books were, and I started with solo books. But thinking back, I can't recall joining a table where there was an older DM with a lot of experience. It was like a second wave of the hobby had started,
Yeah.
and all these people were flocking into role play. We're at the end of the satanic panic kind of stuff. And I would go down the YMCA, and it was massive. People were just flocking to it. But you're right, they were all young, and the inexperience showed. And it was one of the things. I quickly became a forever DM because I just loved running the game, but mainly because I loved creating stories with the players rather than adjudicating. And that was the kind of mindset you had at the time. But you still had a lot of bad DMs who would, I've got all this power. My word is law. And I've always said, the rules became more complicated to protect the players against bad DMs. And I don't know whether that was a good course of action, because it led to third edition. And
I think, you definitely got bad DMs, especially in old school, and new school too, but in old school will ruin the game, because if you've got a game of survival where odds are stacked against the players, and your DM is, well, I've created this encounter, you're going to see it through come what may, and then characters get wiped out because it's been overmatched, and that keeps happening, or the DM realizes it keeps happening and has to fudge the scenario, either fudge the dice or secretly change the hit points or whatever. Oh, you actually hit on that natural 2 because he stumbled. Yes, do your damage. Oh, you got full damage. Yeah. And that's no fun either, right? You're either getting butchered because the DM is out to get you because they got this DM versus player mentality, which you should never have. Or they want to see their novel seen through, so they're going to push you through the otherwise impossible encounter, and so the victory rings hollow.
Yeah, the plot armor that provides in a story, any if you're running a story-based campaign, you've got to account for the fact that the players might die or the party might get wiped out. And if you don't account for that, then why are you bothering with rolling dice or having rules? Because you might as well just make it a collaborative story effort. You know, without dice. You know,
sit around and improvise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the corrections were an overreaction. I think the right thing for them to do is let people mature into the game. And because the thing is, when you look like the basic D&D when it came out with BX, you could learn the rules very quickly, the mechanics of the rules. But it's like, but you can learn how the chess pieces move in 5 minutes. It's going to be a while before you can play chess. And it's very much like that. There's a lot of knobs and things to turn around, and it's much more complicated, especially to run, than it appears at first.
Yeah.
So I think I think the hobby knee-jerk kind of tried to like smooth everything over as opposed to just letting people mature with the game. And I think that's in some ways where it kind of went off the rails a little bit. But also, I will freely admit this is largely a stylistic preference on my part. There are people who love playing that way, and and that's fine. And I can get very into story-based games as long as I know people can die gruesomely and horribly.
Yeah.
I'm actually with you on that one. I want to jump in here real quickly. So Doc, it's still your segment, so I'm going to start with you on this question, but I'd love to hear all of your takes on this. And you can give as simple or as complex of an answer as you want for this, but what are your thoughts on save or die, whether it's a disintegrate spell or that poison that the Dean was talking about? Real quickly, I didn't see that come up a lot. It was there, always the threat, and I've seen it happen, but I didn't see that come up a lot in all the years that I've been playing. But what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I tend to think that, I mean, that was my experience too, but I had better game masters, and I think a game master is sparing with creating those situations. So I think again that comes down to the maturity and mastering how to actually run the game, as opposed to just, well, this is in here, so I'm going to throw this at
So what's an example of something that you would do?
Well, for example, if you're going to create encounters where you're expecting to fight, as opposed to just like this, something happens in the woods and you can avoid it if you want. If like you're doing a dungeon and there's this, and you're stocking it with creatures, you're careful to not put stuff in there that's going to completely overwhelm them. We like, for instance, the level drain with undead, especially when you're dealing with lower level characters. Like the rule we all played with, if you kill it, you get them back.
Okay.
Kind of things like
that. I've seen that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it's a question of, and also again, a big part of the old school is, DIY, rulings over rules. You can and should change stuff, because not everything is going to work in every situation. You have to be, and that's the other thing that really distinguished the old school games from the new ones. It was a lot of it was you were expected to do this kind of by the seat of your pants. You're expected to make adjustments and overrule the book where you had to. So, and again, that's the question of, these were older guys who had a lot of experience playing these kind of games. And so that was just kind of expected among them. And it didn't necessarily translate when you had all these new people coming in and, the dungeon master is learning the game right alongside the players. He's as new to it as they are. So I think that's just something you get from having played a while. You limit those situations. You don't throw them at them constantly, unless you're just trying to TPK the party for fun, which I constantly joke about doing, but I don't. I like them to be scared.
Sean?
Yeah, everything in moderation. I use save or die. I mean, I run AD&D First Ed and OSE, and save or die is the thing. But if I'm constructing a scenario, I'm not going to put a save or die around every corner. It'll be used as it's used. If it comes up randomly, then so be it. But if it's something I've planned as part of a dungeon or encounter, then I'll limit the amount of save or dies that there possibly are. And then I'll consider, okay, how deadly is this dungeon meant to be? If I'm trying to create a Tomb of Horrors-esque thing for high-level smart characters, then there's going to be a few more. If it's just your random dungeon for first-level characters, then a few less.
All of them.
All of them, yeah. So yeah, I think it's fine. And on the topic of level drain, I know that wasn't the exact thing. I mean, I love level drain. I think it really puts the fear of God into players, and so I don't work around it. And even people ask, so what about restoration spell? Sure, if you have a 14th level cleric.
I've seen more people quit or basically self-delete characters over level drain than any
death.
other. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I had a player once. He lost a level. He went from 9 to 8, and he was ready to rage quit the character and start over. And it's like, so that's level drain down to 1 then, right? It makes no sense. Yeah. The thing I do with level drain is like you just get the experience back, like I do level training and all that. So if you get the XP back, then you don't have to retrain, but it comes back with time. It's not necessarily a house rule, but yeah, no, save or die. It's a part of the game. It has its place, but you don't want to overuse it.
Okay, and Dean, what are your thoughts?
I've got one quick observation here, which is it seems the war gamers try to avoid combat, and the new people coming into the hobby, myself included, we loved the combat and wanted to get into combat.
Can I ask you a question about that without trying to derail this too much here?
Absolutely, yeah.
I usually say this derisively. I'm going to be open about that, but I don't mean it in this case. I'm actually asking in curiosity. Does that come from the realm of computer games where you go from encounter to encounter to encounter to encounter? It's kind of expected that you're supposed to fight everything you come across, especially 90s computers games.
Yeah. The computer games were catching up kind of to where we were. The gold box hadn't come out. You had the Bard's Tales and stuff like that beforehand. And I think that was definitely an
Zork.
Zork, yep.
No comment Zork though.
Yeah. But you also had a lot of modules coming out where the combat was quite intensive. One of the first modules I ever ran was Runes of Adventure, which was turned into the gold box Pools of Radiance. And it's a fantastic module, but there is a lot of combat in there, combat you can't really avoid. A second ed module, and I think within second edition, it was expected you were going to be doing far more combats that you couldn't avoid as opposed to first edition. And the mindset generally was, we're coming together, we're doing a bit of role play, we're heroes, we're going to get into a scrap, we're going to do some combats. And the players generally wanted combats and they enjoyed it. So what that meant is save or dies were a lot more relevant in that environment because you're having a lot more combats. And at the time, we talked about level drain. There was a common house rule, which was if an undead hit you, and it was about to drain a level, you got to make one saving throw versus death magic. And if you succeeded, you managed to resist the level drain. And then a second house rule came out, which was if you lost your level, you retained, you didn't lose the XP, but your effective level dropped. So you could always restore it, even if you gained further XP. So you never lost the XP. Magic could be used to gain that XP back. And that was just to soften the kind of save or dies. The one thing I used, and it's because as I said, I loved the story and I didn't want, players felt it incredibly unfair. And when I was playing, I felt it incredibly unfair. I had a DM who, we're exploring this dungeon. One of the players opens a door. There's a Medusa just happens to be standing there. And the DM goes, right, you've all had a look, right, save or be petrified. And we're like, what? So no chance of, no, just save all. And half the party petrified. It was a TPK at the end. And at that point, I was thinking, this is not fun. This is really not a great way to play the game. I love the combat. I love the game. I love the mechanics. But yeah, this seems unfair. And I introduced hero points probably a lot longer before they were commonly used, which is you do something great, you have a good bit of role play, clever thinking, here's a hero point. You can spend a hero point to get one reroll. And that just softened the save or dies. It took some of the unfairness out of it. It wasn't a guarantee. You could still lose your character, but generally the player wouldn't feel like, it was down to one dice roll.
I feel that's a bad adjudication. The specific Medusa scenario you're talking about.
It was. It was, as I said, there were a lot of bad DMs.
Yeah,
that was a big thing with the early dungeons. It was just this hallway with a bunch of rooms and a bunch of monsters standing there.
A monster standing there waiting
just waiting there.
And
Yeah,
that's sorry, that's just a case where the using the system as written, like the actual rules would have avoided that whole situation. Like the Medusa can only focus on one at a time. There's roll for surprise. You might have surprised her, so you guys can all avert your gaze, or she surprises you and then somebody's auto petrified, that kind of thing. All of that mitigates all of that just by adhering to what is written in the rules, as opposed to trying to, I'm out to kill you, so everybody make a saving throw, and
Yeah, a lot of DMs would point to the section that says, the DM's word is law. And I think that's when 3rd edition came along. A lot of players were heaving a sigh of relief because finally they had a set of ground rules that everybody played to. And all of a sudden it felt like a little bit more of a level playing field. But with the save or dies, I think if you're in for that kind of a game, and if I joined a table and they said, this is the style of game, my mindset would be brilliant. I'm just going to create a character. Let's have some fun. And if I roll a dice, I die. Oh, well, that next character, out we go. But I wouldn't be looking at a story. I wouldn't be looking at anything more than just we're exploring a dungeon. Let's see how far I can get with this character before it dies. And that would be my mindset.
Well, that speaks to any game. Like you need to go in, know what you're getting into.
Absolutely.
If you join my table, you're going to be told, all right, my OSE game is brutal. Everybody makes 3 characters. Expect to go through one or two of them. Yeah. Sometimes all 3, and then just that's the game. That's how we play.
What I would expect though is whoever's running the game to treat every player the same and fairly. Regardless, and we didn't have that back in the day, and I think that's spurned a lot of the changes we've then seen since then.
Yeah, that was the quickest way to destroy a group.
Yeah,
unless you had no other choice, because I've seen some people be at some toxic tables knowing it was toxic because it was their only way to play in the 80s. But I hear you. I have one last question.
Let their girlfriends play.
Don't get me started on that. One last question. We do got to get into the next segment here, but I have one last question because I think it's a great way to wrap up this one here. Again, Doc, it's still your segment, so you'll get it first. What does fairness look like in old school play compared to modern play? Or again, the styles, however you want to term it here. In your mind, what does fairness look like?
Well, in the old school games, it's basically just sticking to the book. And, with the understanding that, exceptions are going to be made in specific situations. You have to approach it. These are the mechanics of it, and how do I put this? I think because it was more it was a more mechanical, game as opposed to like a story with a game attached to it. It was just about being impartial for the game master. This is what the dice say. No fudging. No playing favorites. Once you start getting into more story games, like the later and newer games, it's when you're creating, like, especially when everybody's got a backstory, and you're trying to weave things in, and then you're trying to balance, and like, no, Bob, you're not the infant prince of the universe who was kidnapped by pixies. Knock that off. So I mean, it's become more complicated now. I'm answering this very badly because it's a difficult question.
Okay. I mean, I wasn't trying to put anybody in the spot like that. It's just, generally the concept. Like from my point of view, I'm literally in the middle of you guys. And this is the hard part for me because I hear a little bit of Dean says, I'm like, yeah. And then I hear some more what he says. I'm like, no. Hear what Doc says. I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, no. Like I'm really in the middle there. But from my take, fairness from the old school is, like you said, the rule book, and you have to have faith in the game master. In the more modern sense, it seems like you have to have a little bit more faith in the players and the direction that the story's going in. Now, that might be completely wrong, but that's how I see it.
Yeah. I think that basically comes down to that. It's once you start adding more narrative elements, it becomes more and more complicated to adjudicate fairly. I think that just comes with the new territory of.
But only if you feel the need to adhere to the narrative, right? Yeah. You can let the narrative go and adapt to the situation, then you're going to be fine, modern or old.
Sean, what does fairness look like to you between old school and more modern?
It just boils down to adherence to the dice and the system, right? The roll the dice up front. Roll, honor the dice. If you're not going to honor the dice, don't bother rolling them. But when you roll the die, you honor the results. That's fair for everybody.
Yep.
If whether it's combat, a saving throw, or even a random encounter, or I like to use I practically married to reaction adjustments. I'm one of those types of DMs. You don't dump stat your charisma, because I will roll the reaction, and if it's hostile, even if you're being super nice, well, you've got a hostile reaction. It doesn't mean an attack. They don't draw a sword and kill you, but you could provoke the hostility.
Nobody trusts your platitudes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hostile roll, and that changes the direction of the game. It's not necessarily combat, but if the noble decides he doesn't like you, he puts you in the stocks. Well, you can't argue with the nobility, so I guess you're going to the stocks. But then the players have choices. What do they do? Do they resist? Do they go along with it? All of that, and so you can't get that if you don't honor the dice. If a DM rolls a reaction adjustment and it says, "Oh, it's hostile," but doesn't know how to play that hostility or what to do, then why did you bother rolling, right?
Yeah, and when you do occasionally run into situations where you need something to happen to progress things along, then just make a ruling.
Mhm.
Just don't make it about the dice roll, because once the players know the dice don't mean anything, just all the steam goes out of the game.
Right.
I mean, it grinds to a halt, and it's just like, okay, we're just sitting around the tables saying stuff. The tension has to be there.
And I mean, in terms of fairness at the table, this is an important skill that DMs need to learn, is giving everybody their turn, right? Like I've seen games where a player sits out for half an hour while the DM is focusing on somebody else. You gotta learn to manage your time. Even if Doc, I'm running you and you've gone off, you're the thief, you've snuck off and you're doing something. I have a little tally counter. It's like, all right, you've taken a turn. I'm moving over to somebody else's point of view. I'll get back to you, kind of thing. I think that's a skill to cultivate. That'll keep people engaged because it's fair. Everybody's getting their moment to do something. Even if your decision is, well, you know what, I'm going to sit down and watch the thief just struggle. Well, that's fine. You've at least had your opportunity to make that choice. So I think that's important that the DM get around the table and make sure everybody's engaged. That keeps it fair as well. And that helps with that sense of fairness, because then everybody knows that they're playing and they're involved.
Okay.
That's neither old or new school. That's just general etiquette.
That's fair. So, all right, Dean, same thing with you. What does fairness look like to you when you think of old school play compared to more modern play styles?
Fairness is having the adjudication being consistent to me. So if you do the same thing twice, not having the goalposts suddenly change unless there's outside factors, and being in a game where those goalposts constantly change, and especially where they favor one player over another, that feels unfair. But where you're all playing to the same rules and the dice rolls actually matter, that to me is fairness. And this happens in both old school and new school. With old school, I think there's a little more of the DM deciding, and therefore the consistency of the DM is important. And if a DM forgets a call they made at one point and then change that call a second time, a player won't forget that. And a player will call the DM and go, hang on, the first time we did this, you said this, and now you're saying that. And I think that's why a lot more framework came in, a lot more rules came in. And when I was running games, it was a trap I fell in from time to time, which is consistency of calls. And when you got a lot going on, you got a lot of things, a lot of balls to juggle. Sometimes that consistency can fall apart. So when third edition came along, at first I was like, brilliant. There's rules for everything. I don't have to keep making calls because it's there. They want to climb something, it's there. If they want to talk to someone, it's there. That has its own traps, and that's probably a different conversation. But for me, fairness is treating all the players the same and being consistent in how you adjudicate.
Yeah, I think really it all comes down to just like, the character of the people involved. I think it's I don't think there's really a point to try to distinguish between the two, because I think it's going to carry over no matter what kind of game you're playing. I think the same qualities. It all comes down to everybody at the table trusting each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Regardless of what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, different situations are going to come up depending on how your rules are set up, but ultimately it's all coming from the same place.
Yeah, it's not always possible to adjudicate the same way, because contextual situations may change things. But I agree.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
you want to remain as consistent as possible.
All right, well, let's get ready to move into the second segment. But before we do that, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to all the panelist channels. Your support helps keeps the conversation going and reach more tabletop RPG fans. Look at this, we got a new person on today. We are reaching out. We're trying to get a more diverse panel. By the way, so far, sorry for everybody else who's been on a panel, but so far, this has been my favorite panel of the year. Although last episode was really amazing. And I say that because I think this is the first time we truly have people on opposite ends of the spectrum having a conversation about stuff, and absolutely fantastic. I love this so far. Coming up soon in segment 2, our panelists will discuss how they believe the hobby shifted. However, before we do that, let's read some super chats and a couple others that I starred here and get their take on stuff. Some weirdo, Doc Flemigo, however you say that, has been a member. Doc Flamingo has been a member for 19 months. Age of Blood and Iron. Buy it. You know you want to. Mine are sitting back there behind that cabinet right now, or I'd grab them, but I have my copies of them. You should have your copies of them too. So check that out. And thank you, Doc. I really do appreciate that. Nagahide says, why is it always the DM is out to get the players when the DM creates a situation where the players have the option to run away and make a new plan? Starting with you, Doc, why is it the DM's fault?
It's never the DM's fault. It's always the player's fault, and they deserve
There you
what they got. I don't understand the question. I reject the premise of the question.
All right, Sean.
For my part, I didn't imply that it's always the DM's fault, but there are DMs out there who are out to get the players. Not all DMs are, but there are those who believe it's their job to get the players. I've played with DMs like that, and that reduces the game. If you get a DM who understands that they've got to create the villains and they know that the villain's perspective is to get the players, that's fine if they can remain neutral about the result. But I've had players, our DMs, who would just okay, well, we're going to get you. It's like, well, why are you out to get us? Right. And they take pride in beating the players. It's like, yeah.
Remember, you out to win Dungeons and Dragons. Remember that.
Yeah, exactly. That was my implication there.
And Dean, what are your thoughts?
It's the same. Only Sith speak in absolutes. It is not always the DM's fault.
I feel so called out this episode.
It's not always the DM. You're going to have some DMs where they go out of their way. And I've been in these games where we have been up against impossible odds. And as a group, we said, we are retreating, we're getting out. And we've been told categorically, well, you can't. If you do that, then, you're in the middle of a dungeon. You can't retreat. You've got to keep pressing forward. And as players, we've looked at each other and gone, right, fine. And then we just walked out because they're horrible games to be in. A great DM will listen to you and respond to you as players. And if you want to retreat, we'll allow you to retreat and suffer the consequences of that retreat. Mm-hmm. But I have been with some pretty bad DMs, and they don't allow that. So it's not always the DM's fault.
Yeah, I'm of the mindset that unless the players do something really, really obstinately stupid, they should always have an out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've all worked for people, especially if you've been in the military, you've encountered these people who well, if everyone's miserable, I must be a great leader.
I was in the Air Force. We didn't have that.
In one of my recent games, the players were actually trapped and they had every opportunity to leave, but as you said, they did something stupid, and the enemy was able to come back and trap them in. And that was just an organic development of the situation. But I, as a DM, wouldn't say, okay, well, they're trapped now. It's like, no, this was the logical conclusion of the decision making. And they were trapped. They still found a way out, but they were hemmed in. And that just made it interesting. But I wasn't out to get them.
No. And when that's done, well, the players aren't looking at you as though you put them in that situation. They're looking at each other and going, how did we get in this situation? Yeah.
Oh, we got a $5 super chat. Thank you, Lord Mattias. Appreciate that. Says the early levels are a training ground for novice players. Character death builds character. I think you spelled kills wrong, but whatever. Character death builds character. Thoughts on that? Well, good, Doc, I know you have thoughts about killing characters. Actually, let me phrase this. Doc, you have thoughts about killing players.
Yes, it's an important distinction.
Thoughts or dreams?
Well, starting with the next game, shock collars are going to be mailed to all the players in advance. We're going to test them extensively before each session.
Did any of you guys want to address this one, or should we move on to the next one?
I tend to agree. I mean, a lot of like 5e, you get 5e, and players come in already powerful with a predetermined backstory and a background with mechanical benefits. Whereas you go old school, it's like levels 1 to 3 is your background, and that's the training zone. That's, you know, and somebody mentioned up thread where you don't have to have character death on the line to have good stakes, and I agree with that. But at the same time, if you're playing a game where death is a thing, then you don't want to also diminish that.
Yeah, so he was talking about the game Tales from the Loop, which I think is always fun because I'm a Forbidden Lands guy. I don't even like Tales from the Loop. I didn't like the TV show. I didn't like the like, it's not my type of game. Not that it's, play it. If you love it, play it. But that couldn't be more opposite than Forbidden Lands, and it's literally the same game system by the same company. By, you know, so there's even within kind of I would call it a genre, a system or a motif. There's still that opposite ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah, and you know, like, and death, you know, you got to get used to it. You got to be able to accept that your character's going to die. You get a first-time player falls in love with their first character and they gets killed, they're going to be traumatized. I've seen it happen. I've had people rage quit the game because a character they rolled up in 5 minutes suddenly became their favorite, and how dare you kill me with a goblin? I'm like, well, that's the game. So yeah, you have to learn to adapt to that. That's what low-level characters are great for. You know, you don't necessarily get too attached.
Okay, ready to move on? Or anybody else want to?
All I'll add is each player is going to be different, and some players would like to invest time and energy in a character, and it might be the only game they play once or once a week, once a fortnight. So they might see their character dying as actually a massive setback to the investment of time they've made. But then they shouldn't join a table where characters can die quickly.
Yeah, right.
They should pick the right table with the right game being run so that they get the enjoyment out of the hobby. And they then don't criticize. If they join the wrong table, they don't criticize that table because the rules are set out plainly.
Yeah, and there's such a range of stuff
yeah.
available now that whatever you want to do, there's something, a system out there that's set up to do it.
Rules of etiquette: don't slag the game, don't slag the person running it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Lord Mattias, for the $5 super chat. And finally, Nerd says, panel is solid. Needs more incoherent raging. Just give us time. We're building up into it. We have somebody new on here. We want to scare him away yet. So,
he brings class. He's got the European accent. So.
I know, right?
Oh, thank you.
I'll come in here. Hey, hello, governor. You know, he's, you know, I'm a continent away. He can't throw something at me. I hope. All right, well, let us go into segment 2, which is going to cover how the hobby has shifted. So let's meet Sean. He's been on the show before, but not in a long time. So let's reintroduce yourself. Who are you? What content do you create? And what is your tabletop RPG experience?
Well, my name is Sean. I am the creative producer of Mage's Musings at Merlinster Gandeldor, where I talk D&D and recap games, etc., etc. Next week marks my 40th year playing D&D. I went out and grabbed, I don't know if you can see it there, the red box with my birthday money from grandma at age 13, and that was the start of my journey 40 years ago.
So you finally hit my 40 years, huh?
I've hit the 40 mark. Yeah. In gaming, I'm well past 50 in the life department, but my game of choice is A&D First Ed. But I have taken adopted old school essentials as my close personal favorite second. So anyway, so yeah, that's my
awesome. By the way, RPG Grandma, you need to get on a panel at some point in the future. I'm just saying that. All right, so.
I want to add one more little quick shameless self promo. My channel's hit 4 years this week, and I'm 6 away from the 2,000 subscriber mark. So if you're not,
you've been putting out a bunch of stuff recently too.
Yeah, I've got another batch coming. I completed the Lizard King. I put my AD&D guys through the Tomb of the Lizard King, so I put those recaps up. That was my last batch. But six away from that 2,000 mark. So if you're not subbed and you like Muppets talking D&D, then my channel's for you.
Okay, never mind. I'm gonna copyright strike myself there. All right, Sean. In your view, what forces push the hobby in the direction towards more contemporary cinematic play, so with a stronger scene resolution, clearer spotlight balance, and curated campaign arcs? And how has that divide shaped expectations for campaign style community standards and what a normal campaign looks like?
It was the players, really. I think if you followed the trajectory, like even when I got into the game, age 13, I wanted the power fantasy. I wanted to be the hero. I didn't want to die. I didn't want any of the stuff that I love now as an adult when I look for in the game. So, I think when you get a whole generation of players who want that power fantasy in the story, and they want to be the heroes who conclude, that's going to affect how the rules are laid out. That's going to affect the next generation of game, and likewise video games as well. They had a direct influence on how the rules were laid out in more modern games. So I think it really boiled down to the players, their expectations, and what they wanted out of the game. So, you've got we talked about the Hickman revolution in the 80s. When Dragonlance came out, and then suddenly the Dragonlance modules were beat for beat this railroad story.
Yeah, the modules sucked. Sorry for interjecting, but I'm a huge Dragonlance fan. Dirty campaigner, all that stuff that you grognards used to call us back then, but those modules sucked.
But even the non-Dragonlance Hickman modules, you got Ravenloft, which was obviously a big one. You've got the Desert of Desolation series. They all had a very specific arc and an end game. And
Ravenloft was written by Hickman, was it? Yeah, Ravenloft was written by Hickman.
Ravenloft, the original. I don't know if they did the sequel. Hold on. Well, whatever. We don't have to check it up. But the point is, there was those narrative elements. Now, the original Ravenloft module was still sandboxy enough that you didn't have to worry about following a railroad. But that did lead to a more story-based and plot-based approach. Like if you look at any of the Ravenloft modules from second edition, they're all laid out in chapters and plot lines, and you had to achieve in some of them at least, you had to achieve a certain element of the story before you could continue.
And if you wanted to win, you read the novels.
Yeah. And so I think that definitely influenced it. So you'll get, at least in the D&D sense, you get people who want that cinematic experience, and that shapes the game. So players are at fault. Damn you, players.
I can't really argue with you on any of that. So I guess I'll follow up with this one. Do you see this shift? Because I do believe, as somebody who lived through, like I'm a Hickman Revolution person. So again, a lot of the war gamers aren't happy with my takes because it sounds very 5e-esque to them, even though almost everything you guys have said about player death and running, it should be difficult. I don't care that you only have 2 hit points and a house cat can kill you. I'm all on board with that stuff as well, because I joined during that time. But I like the in-character role-playing. I like the story elements. I want a cohesive world, not some random, where are we going this week, monster of the week thing. So I'm really in the middle there, right? But do you see... Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Finish the question.
Well, the question, do you see the shift as a correction to older excesses, or more as a loss of something essential in terms of like that more sandboxy play?
I'd argue it's both. Like I said, when I got into the game, I wanted that power fantasy. I wanted that story, and I had to get older and look at the other way of playing. And I realized I preferred the older way of playing because I had a different mentality about it. But so, I mean, when I say, players doing that, I'm one of those players who led to that kind of thing because that's what I wanted when I was younger. So in terms of an overcorrection, no, I don't think it's an overcorrection. I think it's just the linear progression based on the demand. How many when they created 5th ed, I know they had to do a correction because 4th ed tanked so bad, but 4th ed was created to combat video games. It was meant to combat World of Warcraft and played a lot like World of Warcraft, from what I understand from people who got into it. And then 5e had to go back and they had to correct that, and they had to say, okay, well, what about old school worked, and what about the new stuff do people like? And they tried to fuse that. Whether or not they succeeded is obviously subjective, but so it's the player demand drove things to the way they are. And I think there's obviously merit in both. I'm not like, if you don't do it the old wargaming way, you're doing it wrong. I love the idea of a story developing. I just like the story to be emergent and flexible.
I agree.
I don't want you to say, well, I have this end game planned with this big battle and you're going to get there hell or high water. That's what I don't want. But you'll get a lot of new DMs who will come into the game, and if they're new especially, they think they have to control it. They're not arbiters, they're storytellers. And as storytellers, they feel they have to control the events. And that I think is, the incorrect, term. It's less satisfying. That's a better way of putting it. I don't like saying incorrect because people play the game they want to play, but for me, it's less satisfying if there's that much control. Sorry, I had a thought. I'm lost. I'm getting old.
I have my notebook because I forget everything.
Yeah, me too. I started rambling and I lost the plot of my point.
Well, it's a conversation. We can come back to it if you remember it at any point.
In terms of the evolution of the game, it really is the demand from the players. I think that drove that. There are outside factors like the video game influence, D&D influenced video games, which in turn influenced D&D. There's a cyclical portion there. But ultimately it's what players wanted and what players expected out of the game, and the companies adapting because they have products to sell, so they want to lean into that expectation as opposed to throwing people for a loop. That's what happened. Fourth Ed threw people for a loop. They thought they wanted the tabletop video game. Turns out people didn't. Even if it is a good system, people I know who play it swear by it, say it's a great system. It's just not D&D. But narrative-wise, they could probably make any good story out of a game of Fourth Ed, just like anything else, if you knew the system.
I think a huge part of the problem with fourth edition was the terminology they chose to use. They really made it look like we're making an analog video game.
Right.
I think if they had avoided that would have cut half of the criticism out right there. But also, I mean, going on, I think the modules, I wouldn't even put it on Hickman at all. I think modules themselves created a weird kind of feedback loop within the game. Because that's people, especially newer people, that's what they would do. They would play modules, and you're boxing yourself in when you're using a module. You're creating something of a railroad just by using them. Some are more sandboxy than others. Like I remember Legion of Gold, the Gamma World module was almost a mini campaign setting more than a proper module. So that was kind of sandboxy. But for the most part, and a lot of them, I remember there was one of the UK modules where you're going up a mountain pass, and you're literally, this happens here, and this happens here, and this happens here. And you're kind of required to do that to an extent with a module for it to work. And since people mostly learn to play on modules, especially new players, I think that it created just this feedback loop.
I don't disagree. I'm a module guy. I play through modules. The big shtick on my channel is I do recaps of modules specifically to review the portions that were played. But I also curate. You look at the modules that suit your style of play, and I like open world modules, or if it is railroady or linear, it's a short module that can be inserted into what is already an open world campaign, so people can take a look. And so, no, we're not doing that. And as far as I'm concerned, if the players say we're not doing that, then off we go. I don't force them down. I don't do quantum ogres, quantum modules, or anything like that. But I agree. It's yes, especially when you started getting into modules that were very specifically plotted. The infamous one from 5e is Tyranny of Dragons, which is it's all just one big railroad.
When I started running 5e, it was I let the players decide which module we would run, and they chose Tyranny of Dragons, and I actually started slotting another content into it just to break it up because it was just so set down the line. My style, so we talked Dragonlance, and when I ran Dragonlance, it was one of the first times I DM'd. I'd read the novels, so I knew the story. I'd plopped the players in at the start, and then I let them take that story forward. And I didn't obey the module or anything like that. And the players could go off into different tangents. They could do things completely differently. And we created our own story of the Dragonlance. And it worked incredibly well. But when you're following a module, you're absolutely right. You've kind of got to go down that route. And as a young, learning DM, you're probably too scared to make a mistake, to go off into the long grass. So you keep to the module, and then that reinforces a railroad approach to running a game. And that means then players expect that, the DM expects that, the people who develop the games reinforce that by creating games that are more down that route, and thus the whole sort of genre begins to shift, and we get this divergent sort of old school, very different to what's considered modern now, because it's just the route modules have taken people, it's the route players have expected the game to be run, and it's the route that DMs are sort of comfortable running games. I think it's a bit sad because we've lost, as much as it's become story driven and very character focused, we've lost the art of creating the story. What we're doing is telling the story and then seeing if the mod, how far the players can get through that story before they die or they succeed. And Tyranny of Dragons is a good example.
Well, a great skill a new DM can learn is abandoning a module. If you're running a module, it's okay to abandon it. It's okay if the players walk away. That's it. Then, you know, and then
but it's great to have the stuff in the background of the fallout from abandoning it. If there's like an end
if it's a big thing.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and the other thing is that there's room for both, even within an individual campaign. Even a very sandboxy campaign can have a very railroaded section, just because you'll put yourself in this situation. You have to get from here to here.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a bit more linear. And I think a lot of people dig in their heels as like, it has to be this way or it has to be this way. And I think that creates a lot of problems too.
Yeah, there's a mix. There comes to be a point of no return where, you know, even a linear module, you have the opt out. You can opt out at any point, but then once you're committed to a certain act, then that's it. You now have to see it through, and that's fine. That's, you know, so long as that point is reasonably obvious to both the DM and the players.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about modules, you know, for the last few minutes here. Anything else outside, like kind of going back to the question here, the cinematic play versus more tactical play? Is that what I want to say? More gamist play? Like just as an example, I'm part of different Facebook groups or, you know, Discords, whatever, and some will just absolutely harp on rules as written, playing it in your 1 minute turns. And I'm not saying that rule is bad. I'm just talking about doing all of this exactly as I can move this far. It's actually, sorry, Dean, but it's why I hated third edition. I hated third edition because I felt like you needed a battle map, and I'm a theater of the mind guy. Yeah. But there are people out there who really want that more gamist, war gamey aspect versus somebody like me, who I'm definitely on the cinematic side. Why I love the Palladium system, why I love some other systems out there, because I just kind of want to imagine what's going on and let's let things happen. So between the two, what do you think kind of caused some of that shift, and what do you think that shift has brought to or taken away from the hobby? And because it's still Sean's segment, we'll start with you.
Oh, sorry, you were addressing Dean there. Well, I love having the minis. I love the tactical, but at the same time, you know, you got to know when to peel back to theater of the mind. I hate pure theater of the mind. I don't hate it, but it's not my favorite. But I also hate pure tactical. Like, you know, I want a mix that gives you a flow. I don't necessarily need the cinematic experience, and I especially don't want it when it means the DM has to arbitrarily step away from the game, as I said earlier, to make their shit happen. But overall, I mean, I also think the minis add to the game, and this might be the old school leanings. Minis add to the game because they create fixed points. You know, if your mini is over here 30 feet away from the rest of your fellows, that's definitive, as opposed to theater of the mind, details will get lost. So having the minis is key to the game. But what you got to be wary about is where the game bogs down, and you know, you want to find that balance of flow. So that's I can't speak. I'm losing my mind. No, that's where it's at for me. That's the ideal of the game, is, you know, when you take the best elements and merge them together.
Dean, what are your thoughts on that?
Having run games in both, very theater of the mind, with combats being roughly drawn if you need to find out where people are, but otherwise it's very descriptive, and they're great. But then they can lead to arguments. A player, no, I wasn't here, I was over there, but the fireball's landing here. and you're there. No, I was over there. And you end up with these silly arguments. The game begins to slow down. That said, third edition and the 5-foot steps and the bog down of that, I hated that. I hated the fact that you had to have the battle map. You couldn't quickly resolve things. A player was counting squares more than living in the moment of that combat encounter. And for me, that was just awful. I think 5e went quite a way to trying to resolve that, which is more the, just kind of, you got a 30-foot move. Roughly, where is that 30-foot going to take you? Don't worry if you're kind of there. You kind of end up where you want to go. And some of the language was toned to more theatre of the mind. 4e, you absolutely had to have your models. It was a squad-based tactical game, which, if it had been sold like that, I think it would still be played today and still be used, because it's the fantasy version of XCOM. And as that kind of a game, it's brilliant. It's not a deep role play game in the sense of like second edition, third or fifth. But when it comes to models, when it comes to theatre of the mind, I'd like to have a system that is capable of both. And you can even dip in and out, quickly draw battle maps, plop some models down when it's needed, or just keep it theatre of the mind because it's a very quick engagement, or there's not a great deal of complexity.
Okay.
I love AD&D for that, because I use a battle map in my AD&D game, but the way it's laid out in inches, because it's evolved from the war games, you could theoretically do that and say, all right, wizard, are you in range or out? I don't know. I can't. Well, no, put that tape measure away. You're going to guess. You were going to guess, and then they'll cast and you drag out the tape measure. Oh, you're off by an inch. Sorry. I love that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do, which is why I prefer theater of the mind. Now, to be fair, I actually do play with miniatures and battle maps, but they're abstract. They're not exactly. I don't care what the squares or hexes. Hexes are always superior to squares, by the way. I don't care what they say. They just give kind of a general idea of where people are. And if you're on that border, that kind of where I'll maybe add another saving throw in, or say another dexterity check or something like that. Did you make it over the hedgerow? Your movement says you might or you might not. Make that dex check and see if you get over it. Make that saving throw to see if you're, and this is why I hate third edition. I'm literally one square away. That fireball is 1 inch from my face. It can't hurt me. No, as somebody put in a comment a moment ago, sometimes things are too precise on that. So this is why I prefer theater of the mind, because then as a game master, say, you know what? You think you're outside the range, but are you? Make a saving throw. If you make it, it's half, or if it's quarter damage or no damage. If you fail, it's going to be half damage, because you weren't exactly as far out of that as you thought you were. Things like that. When they try to do those little, I can just be right on the border, fireball ends right here, kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think there are definitely pitfalls to both. A lot you have to be very aware as a game master, because a theater of the mind combat can turn very much into one of those computer RPGs where you have two lines of characters. I attack him. I attack him. There is a tendency for things to just become an open space where things are going on.
Right.
Whereas if you're using I've encountered this on the couple times I've played in VTTs, all of a sudden a table isn't something you can jump on top of or duck under. It's a wall in the middle of the room. People kind of react to objects like that, not just things they can interact with, but barriers. So that's just, I think, a question of a game master skill that you pick up after a while. You're doing theater of the mind. You got to, he goes behind the table and he's dodging you behind him. You have to bring these things up, and then the players will interact with them.
Not gonna lie, my preference is a whiteboard, because then it doesn't have lines on there, and I just say, this is the shape of the room. This is about this. It's about this far.
Even a basic reference makes a huge amount of difference. Even if you're not plotting things out, just, this is the space and this is what's in here. It makes a very big difference. And I very much encourage people to do that, especially early on when they're getting their feet for it, because otherwise a theater of the mind combat can very much turn into just an open arena space.
It also depends, of course, on what game you're playing too. If you're playing a game like D&D, or even the newer versions where the grid is factored into the rules, you're going to want. But Palladium, as an example, to me, I haven't played Palladium in 30 years, but it was tailored for theater of the mind. You could play Palladium theater of the mind better than you could like D&D. That it works better with a grid.
Yeah. The one thing I've found, I've been forced to use Roll20 for a lot of stuff. I prefer playing games in person, but you know, I have a lot of players that can't make it to the house, and players that live quite a distance away. So Roll20's become something I use on an ongoing basis. And the one thing I struggled with on Roll20 was I would create the battle map. It would be nice and pretty, lots of little graphics, incarnate, slap it all together, put it on the table, and all the description stopped. And all the players would just be, you know, there would be no theatre of the mind at all. It would just be looking at what was drawn.
On there.
To the point, I actually made a classic map set. So your classic maps from first edition, second edition, all the lines, the blue colors, and all the rest of it. And now I do all my maps like that. And I describe what's in the room. And instantly now the players are more active. They're going, all right, so this is, and that, and important things like tables and stuff are marked, but they know they can interact with those. All the clutter, debris on the floor and stuff like that, that's removed. It's all description. So the players are now left with their imagination rather than just looking at a drawn map and imagining, or just seeing the map rather than imagining. And that seems to have worked quite well. It also then starts, the one thing I try not to do is get too precise. I've got rules. If you do a fireball and you're hitting a creature that's in melee with one of your party members, you're going to hit your party member. You know, it's stuff. Even though the fireball might not extend that far, it doesn't matter. They're bouncing back and forth. They're in and out. Make a spellcraft check. See if you can weave the spell enough to avoid hitting your party member. Otherwise, you've hit them.
We've got a comment that says you're quieter. I'm hearing you fine.
Yeah, Poly Robotics, we did try to test that beforehand, and he bumped up his volume a little bit, but maybe it wasn't enough for some of you folks. But thanks for letting us know.
And so
there we go. I'm just checking now. Is that a bit better?
You're a little louder to me.
Better. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see what the folks out there say. I guess the only other thing I would like to address in this, and this is kind of a loaded question, so I don't know if I want to ask it the way I wrote it down here, but I'm going to. How have online communities and social media shaped what people believe or perceive they believe is the quote-unquote right way to play or run a campaign? That's for you still, Sean. Yeah.
You create echo chambers. You know, you'll get groups coming together because, you know, they found a group online on Discord or wherever that plays their way, and suddenly, you know, you get that one true wayism because everybody's in that same echo chamber. And then you'll get these disparate groups of echo chambers all arguing with each other. But on the flip side of that, you know, being able to find other people online is a good thing. You can go to various forums and have discussions, sometimes heated, sometimes rational, about different styles of play, and you'll see new perspectives as well if you're open-minded. But yeah, I think largely, you know, I've seen various people they just get insular with their style of play.
Did you read my Substack post that I made yesterday?
Not
because you literally just damn near quoted it. Those were the words how you like that's good, but they change from being like, hey, this is, you know, let's enjoy this game the way we like to play it together, to being cultish, insular, and one true way is, yeah, it's like,
well, this is clearly why you like having me on, because we have similar thoughts.
I see. I needed somebody to represent me. Thank you, Sean. All right, go, Dean or Doc. Actually, we'll just go to Dean. Dean, what are your thoughts on social media and its
social media is great because you get to meet so many more people that are like-minded, and I think this is where a lot of the problems come in. Someone's coming into the hobby new. They meet a group of people who say, this is how you play the game. They build up their worldview of their hobby as that. Then someone comes along and says, no, you can also play like this. And that person's now going, no, hang on. I've been told this is the only way you can play. So you must be doing it wrong. And we're tribal by nature. You know, we're tribal creatures. So all of a sudden they perceive that as an attack. And before you know it, you got these two echo chambers, as Sean said, attacking each other because they both have a worldview of what they feel the hobby should be, and not recognizing the fact that we are all very different. It's steak and cake. Sometimes you want steak, sometimes you want cake. Sometimes you only ever eat steak, and you don't understand the people who eat cake because they're wrong. They shouldn't be eating cake. They should be eating steak. And the internet's great at reinforcing that view. And I think it's pretty bad because you'll get a lot of strong personalities that will rise up. And I had a run-in quite early on coming onto X. where I asked an innocent question, which is one-to-one time. Oh, what is this? And I got pointed to a video, and the video was saying if you didn't use it, you were playing wrong. And I was like, well, okay, I don't agree with that. But
Welcome to the OSR.
Yeah, I wanted to ask questions because I was interested in the mechanics. I was interested in how it was actually done because I could perceive benefits and also drawbacks. And I got hit with immediate accusations, and it was a hostile environment I'd suddenly entered. And I kind of took a step back, and then I managed to find some nice people to explain it to me, and I went through it with them. And at the end of it, it's exactly what I thought it would be. It suits some tables, doesn't suit all tables. And it's a great option if you want to play the game that way. And there are benefits, but there's also some big drawbacks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a style play that Sean and I, he was on, I think it's the last time he was on the show, absolutely disagree on. I despise troop play, but I think that's your primary style, isn't it?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I don't do it as a style, but everybody has multiple characters that they can draw from. So if a character is out of commission for whatever reason, they've got a backup.
See, I'd nope out of that table, be like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I'm glad you guys are having fun. But and then before I go, because this is what I have to do because of social media, I flip over his table and then I walk out.
Yes. You have to. You can't agree with people who have a differing view, and I don't like the internet for that because we're all different. Can't we just get on? We have an amazing hobby.
Yeah, I think social media has done to gaming what it has done to everything it's touched, which is basically destroy it. Personally, I've mostly retired from social media, having accomplished my lifelong goal of alienating all of my childhood friends. So I feel like I won, so I can move on now. But yeah, it's just, the internet has created a on-demand 24-hour road rage situation. And that's kind of the nature of the beast. And as generations go on with this technology, we'll find some kind of equilibrium. Who knows exactly what it will look like
when AI takes over.
Once internet trolls start getting doxxed and punched in the face more regularly, they'll come.
Dean, to your point, there's Kevin Sambita is famous for saying this, that role playing is incredibly personal. And before he said those words, and no, I don't take everything Kevin says as God said, it made me think about something differently. Look, I am one of those people. I'm very puritanical about the way I play. And of course, my way is the right way. And when I talk about it, I'm always going to talk about it as my way is the right way. And we've had discussions about, everything from edition wars to yada, yada. But what we never did back in the day compared to what I more metaphorically, but I see more now. We never flipped over anybody's table. We never ostracized. All we do is say, like, you know what? Don't be loud, and you guys play over there. Do you need us to help you grab some chairs? Something like that. But now it's like, no, you can't be in the same space. Or look at those people. Spending half your time at the table bitching about how they're playing over there, and so on and so forth, instead of just doing your thing.
Yeah. Well, this is the disadvantage of the internet, where nobody can punch you in the face when you require it.
I don't know. The internet might be changing. They're starting to require a freaking identification everywhere. I'm starting to get scared that people are going to start driving to my house. All right. Is there anything else? Because we do need to get to the next segment here. We're never going to have a call-in portion here, but anything else you guys want to talk about in terms of forces that push the hobby? I don't want to leave anything on the table for you. We'll start with you, Sean. If there's anything that you think wasn't said about the things that push the hobby from the more older gamist style to the more cinematic style.
I mean, like I said, it was the players. The only thing I'd add is, the idea that people sort of adhere to what they were first exposed to, generally speaking. If you came in, as Bear likes to say, dirty, filthy story gaming, that's going to tend to be what you stick with. Sometimes, people adapt and adjust. So that will push it. If you come in and it's all about story, then you're going to look for those games. You're going to promote those games, and the companies, as I said, are going to create those games if there's a demand for it. So.
Okay. Dean, any follow-ups that you've got there? Anything we didn't cover? Okay. Doc?
Yeah, I think this is actually something I would say good about is the diversification, polluted as that word has become, of the situation where you can find whatever you want now. There are games tailored to whatever style of play you want to do, and that is a absolute good.
Yeah, I haven't said it recently, I don't think, but I always talk about my train stops. If you want to get off on that old chainmail white box, whatever, it's that first train stop, do it. If you want to get off on the Shadowrun train stop, you get off at that stop. If you want to be second edition guy like me, you get off, yada yada yada, right? Like to me, it's just a bunch of different train stops out there that you can get off on and enjoy the game with people who
Phrasing.
also get off at that stop.
Phrasing.
And it and you can
Fair.
get back on and go somewhere else too. That's the other thing. I'm very
Yeah.
like myself flexible. I can play a beer and pretzels game and have a perfectly good time. I can play a super crunchy game or just I would stop short of coin flipping, but I can go anywhere. It's usually about the table. Like a good game master can make a crappy game hugely fun.
Yeah.
And a terrible game master make a great game awful.
Yeah.
It's all about the people you're playing with ultimately.
The game you want to play. Yeah.
All right, then. Don't forget to share the stream, tap the hype button, help us keep the discussion trending. And by the way, make sure that you subscribe to all their channels, or in Dean's case, check out his website. Links are in the description there. Before we move on to segment 3, which we'll be talking about choosing, time to choose. You have to pick one or something in the middle between old school, modern players, some type of hybrid. Let's read some super chats, and then we'll move on here. Those were read. That was read. Well, let's just go to the beginning here. Boop. I started here. Zarian says, now it's anime, because we were talking about like computer games had the influence, so forth. Now it's anime. I see so much anime influences now. I'm watching that One Piece live action, and it's totally a young person's D&D game. I wish I had it prepared for you, Zarian. One of the things that Crafty sent me a picture a few years ago, but I have them kind of side by side, is that AD&D second edition book right at the beginning with the Tired Adventures and that dragon slung over the tree. That when you look at it, it's like, okay, that was a pretty baby dragon, but they're all looking beat up and they're looking tired, leaning on the staff. Exactly. It's like I think it's the first real picture in that book.
I'll find it.
Then right next to that, it's like an anime thing of like a tiefling and a dark elf, and yeah, that I love that picture. It's so reminiscent. Like, look at us, and when you realize that dragon's just a baby, you're like, okay, But you know what? They're proud of that. They should be proud of that. But yeah, then they got the whole anime nonsense going on, and that's definitely not how when I vision D&D, I vision what Sean just put up there, not that anime crap. That's Bessem, a big eye, small mouth. That's a whole different game for me. But what do you guys think about his comment?
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I had this conversation with somebody a while back where old school D&D is your pulp swords and sorcery, modern D&D is anime.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
and the thing is, there's a better anime game out there. It's called Earth Dawn, and you'll love it.
Also, I think they're different in the way they is. Like anime is very much an aesthetic influence, whereas the relationship with video games was very much a mechanical influence. So they're different in that way. And also remember, early video games even were very different from what they became very quickly. I mean, they had that whole like moon logic thing we're going on. It's like you could like play 50 hours into a game. It's like, oh no, you failed at hour 5 when you didn't give the sandwich to this guy.
Yeah.
So.
King's Quest 2 was the first one I ran into, where if you walked across the bridge too many times, it'd break, and basically your adventure was over. Okay, Dean, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's different play styles, but I do agree. 5e especially has become more superhero based, more like a Marvel movie, and it's one of the reasons I don't run 5e anymore, because it became too ludicrous. I'm all about immersion, making the story believable, and giving the players options. And it when you sort of jump the shark and it becomes ludicrous, for me, it's not my style. That said, some tables, they love it. They love being outlandish. They love doing the really strange, weird stuff. All power to them, go and do it. But there's definitely been that swing, and that is now a valid play style.
Okay. Paladin Steel for $5 says, I heard tabletop video game and had an instant flashback to family dinner nights at Pizza Hut. I had a flashback to playing. We used to play all the time at Perkins up in Minnesota. So we'd play at Perkins. We'd get a corner booth. We'd start playing our games there. We'd get our coffee and our French fries or whatever it was, and we'd just start playing. We'd spend all night at Perkins. We just had to keep the coffee cups coming so that they wouldn't kick us out. You guys play anywhere interesting like that? Or?
At a Pizza Hut? No.
Oh. Well, hey,
No,
what's
no.
that Wendy's Feast of whatever it's called? That's a role playing game. Go find it. We covered it on our channel at some point, and I'm so embarrassed of that. I hate you, heathen dog. Feast of Legends. That's what it's called. Look up the game Feast of Legends,
Isn't that a cookbook?
and then watch the Legion Myth video on that one and cry. RPG Grandma says minis can help folks with understanding tactics. I disagree. Well, no, I actually agree with that. I don't want them to understand tactics. I want them to play organically. I want them to do what their character would do, not worry about if I move in this square, it's +1. If I move in that one, it's attack of opportunity. And if I move in this one, it's got to be a range 2 weapon. I don't like any of that stuff, but I'm also not a war gamer.
But understand tactics. So if they're playing a warrior, they need to understand tactics.
Put your shield up. Stand in front of the... Anything else you guys want to add to that?
No, I love minis. So, I mean, you won't get me arguing against minis.
Yeah, I think the system has to support that. So things like attacks of opportunity, if they're done well and they're not too grindy and not too micromanagey, I think they work well, especially when they're adapted to Theatre of the Mind if you want to play that style, or with minis without causing. The 5-foot step in third was just silly. It was a stupid mechanic. But the idea of you leaving someone's melee and turning your back on them, and just even in second, I think even in first
second edition had attack of opportunity rules, but they made sense. If you did a withdraw, you're basically fine. If you just turn and scoot, somebody gets an attack. It was that simple.
Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of
and that works well.
A lot of third ed rule came from second ed, from the combat and tactics. Like they almost ported it over.
Well, the rule I stated there was actually in the player's handbook, and I state that because I didn't like the combat and tactic books either, other than the bleeds. I love the bleeds. But yeah, it was just a matter of, did you bolt away or did you basically do a tactical retreat? And that was the main difference on if somebody got an attack of opportunity or something. It made sense. It was vague enough for somebody to adjudicate it, not this, oh, I moved 8 feet instead of 5 feet, so that means I get a free attack. I don't like it when it comes down to numbers like that. That's my personal issue. I know other people like that. I don't. But. All right. Then we have on the opposite of the spectrum, and that's why I don't like minis. Makes everything too precise, too perfect, and that's I couldn't agree with that comment more.
But sometimes you need the precision to let this situation play out. And I mean, I'm speaking from a D&D perspective. Certain character classes suffer if you don't use the minis. And that's even true in old school. Thieves, people talk about thieves suck in AD&D, and they don't. They suck when you take away the things that make them good. And positioning is important to a thief. And if you've taken that away, then you've diminished them. So sometimes you need the precision.
I mean, you don't need a mini to say I'm behind somebody or flanking somebody necessarily. Just like, hey, I'm coming up at this angle, or I'm going to tumble behind him or something like that. You can still get that across without that. Look, to be very clear, I'm not anti-mini. I just don't think that they're necessary.
But not all situations permit that, and the specific context is important. And if the thief has like a very narrow path to get behind the enemies, then you've got to play that situation.
Yeah, you can do that Theater of the Mind, but it takes a high degree of skill for both the players and the game master to manage it without it devolving into like, I'm here. No, you're not. Yes, you are.
I'm the dungeon master. I win, you lose. It's that simple. Like,
yeah, I mean, if having these allows you to be a lot more granular and to visualize things, you don't necessarily need them, but it a lot of stuff can easily get like lost in the mist without.
Yeah, I guess my rebuttal, and I won't spend too much time on this, is just simply I'd rather somebody play a character than a character sheet. That's my style. Is But again, I'm in the middle. Like, I'm gonna agree with a lot of old school stuff, but there's also a lot of new school sensibilities that I'm glad that the hobby's moved on. So
and that's right there. The character versus the character sheet is very much at the heart of what I'd say is the delineation between old and new school.
Sure.
The break between it's about the player and it's about the character. I think that if you're going to draw a line, I think that's where I would have to put it.
Yeah, my contention would be that more modern style is more about playing the character sheet because there's so much more on there. I saw that particularly with third edition. I played third edition only second to second edition, and compared to all the games I've played from Earthdawn to Palladium, yada yada yada. I've played second edition is probably what I played the most, and third edition is what I played second the most. And that was a drastic change. Sure, we had non-weapon proficiencies and we had to worry about weapon specialization, little things like that, and check out our spells. But literally, people are looking at the character sheet. Hold on, what can I do here? What do you mean? What can you do? What would your character do in this situation? Stop looking at the character sheet, trying to see what your biggest plus is going to be. Like, what would you do in this environment? So for me, playing the character sheet is more of a modern thing than an old school thing. But to be fair, that truly stems from the wargaming side, where you had to play the character sheet because it was literally everything you could do, right? So it seems like there's kind of like a little jump in there.
Well, I think with experience too, players, they can learn to, it's like, okay, I have the sheet, but I can still convey it in terms that doesn't break immersion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think I've seen it at tables where a new player joins the table and the first question they ask, "What can I do?"
What can I do?
Yeah, and the table goes, "Anything you want," and the player's just out of their depths, and they then look at the character sheet, but there's nothing on there to guide them.
So I'm glad you said that, because at our tables, my players have been really good about that over the years to say, what would your character do? Like, they'll even reiterate what I said. And I don't mind for a new player. I do not mind slowing the game down for this. Like, okay, he just told you this is what you see and this is what would you do if you're standing there? What would you just play yourself for a second? What would you do? And now imagine that you're wearing armor and you're carrying a sword or whatever it happens to be. My players would help encourage that. So kudos to my players.
Yeah. I like, sorry, go on.
I think it's gone a bit too far the other way, where now you only ever look at your character sheet. And that's down to the way the game's run, the advice given to how you run the game. And you're right, it should be more, what are you trying to do? Okay, now, is a dice roll necessary to determine if there's success? And if it is necessary, what's the best skill to adjudicate this? And that way you lift the player's mind away from the character sheet. But players want to succeed. So they're going to be looking, a player who's got a low strength isn't going to look at a tree and go, I'm going to climb that tree, because they'll look at their character sheet and go, my strength's low and it's strength to climb a tree. So my character's not good at climbing a tree. But I consider that an informed decision by to the player. The player's using metagaming, but it's an informed decision on how they role play their character. A weak person wouldn't try and climb a tree, and they play the character just that way. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I try to encourage players, like new players. I just tell them, don't worry about the mechanics. Just don't even think about the mechanics. Yep. I will describe the scenario. Just try to engage with the scenario as best you can. We will finesse you through the mechanics. Just engage with the scenario. That usually does the trick for new players.
And also, I think it comes down to again, cultivating skill in the players, because a lot of times less is more. When you start adding all these like feats and, you have this like half move over here and all that stuff, that will
overwhelm.
That overwhelms. And also it creates clear boundaries what you can and cannot do, at least in people's minds. And it's one of those things. I think there's too much of an overcorrection as opposed to just allow people to learn to play the game. It's tried to like, no, you can do this and this and this. It's unnecessary training wheels, I think, a lot of the time in a lot of games.
Okay. It causes analysis paralysis for new players as well, from one of the things I've noticed. But
all right, let's players sometimes too.
Yeah, fair. Where are we at? I want to make sure I don't skip anything here. Yep, did that one. So next one is, I think that's Theater of the Mind is the best. Remember the rule of Ming, of the Ming vase? I don't know that one. Or if I do, I just don't know that name. That's how you make combats exciting. Encourage players to narrate the action too. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things I've taken to recently is two changes I've made, probably the two biggest changes I've made in the last decade in my playing. One was almost a decade ago, and the other one's been more recent. Is, first of all, it isn't roll the die, or it isn't tell me what your character says to make the charisma check. It's roll the die. Or what is your intent? What is it you're trying to do? I'm trying to swindle, and I want that. I want the gem from him. Okay, so you're trying to get the gem. How are you doing that? Well, I want to convince him that it's in his best interest. Blah blah blah. Great. Roll the die. Oh, you got a 1. How did you fumble this? What did you tell him? Give me the damn something like that. So what ends up happening is instead of this character just doing this amazing thing, and I know some people are like, well, just give him a bonus if he says something amazing. Now, the dice are supposed to determine what happens. So the die said, you did crap. So how did you do it? Have some fun with it. Flip side of it is, don't tell me all this weird combat maneuver stuff you're trying to do with your sword and axe and so forth. I do want a little more than just I attack them, but don't get too crazy until you make that attack roll. Now you made that attack roll, dude. You got a 20 and it was a murder shot. What did you do? Whatever you want it to be, what did you do? Or, well, hopefully you didn't try something too crazy because you got a 4, you missed. We can just say you missed, but tell me what you did just to put it out there. I'm actually using more words here than I'd actually use at the table, but you get what I'm saying. So I've kind of taken this whole thing. It's like, let's not be too expressive at first. Let's wait till the die roll and then express it based on what that die roll said a little more. That's one of the things that I've been taken to. What are you guys' thoughts on Lord Matty's comment?
I definitely like that idea a lot, because especially if somebody who's like going to get like potentially like tongue-tied, well, I don't know what I'm going to say to get the gem away from it.
Mhm.
If you do that and give them the result, you're narrowing it down to a very specific scenario. I screwed up. How did I screw up? You're focusing them more by giving them that.
Right, and somebody doesn't have to be incredibly glib either to get it. I'm not going to be like, hey, how did you save? How did you stop war in the Middle East in order for us to get this? To get the prize here. The idea is just put something out there. What is that you try to do? Give it your best shot, because I do like in character role playing. And then we'll move on. So somebody who's not comfortable being the face or the bard or whatever term you want to use still has the opportunity to play the type of character he wants to play and that he can enjoy playing without being like, well, I'm not really an outgoing person. Okay, well, we'll make it happen for you through the die rolls.
Yeah, I don't tell people how to role play. Like if somebody is they're somewhat introverted and they just want to narrate third person how they act, that's fine.
Oh, hell, there's no third person at my table.
But at the same time, I've got people who are all for hamming it up, and it's like, just play to your comfort.
Yeah, and that's again different tables for different folks. Sorry, Dean, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I take a very similar approach, and I put the role play, the character, the player first in those situations. So if someone's trying to convince an NPC, they tell me how they're doing it. They role play that out, and then a bonus may be given or not. If a player's naturally introverted and they're stumbling around, but they're putting a lot of effort into it, and you can see they're really trying their heart, even if they've been quite quiet. Yeah, I take that into account. An eloquent player who does the same, they probably have to go a bit further because they got to put a bit more effort in, because they're more capable of giving more at the table. So it's this mix of, I look at how the player's trying to engage, what they're saying, what the NPC's thinking, and then the dice roll. A little bit back to front, and I've heard both routes, and both routes have pros and cons. I think I don't think one's better than the other. I think they're just two different ways of doing it. But yeah, you got someone who role plays their heart out. They then roll the dice and they get this awful result, and I'm there going, okay, so how did the NPC take offense at what was sent, or why hasn't it worked? And then I kind of push it back to the NPC. You're trying your best, and normally I'll pick on something small. Something small that the player said, and the NPC picks on that. Oh, you said, ignoring the rest of it, just like it happens on the internet.
Yeah.
And in real life. Yeah.
And in real life, absolutely.
That's why you don't dump stat charisma.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that I've learned in life. Heathen Dog runs into this a little bit when he was at tables that I was running at. And him and Garth would be the other one. They would come up with these totally rational, you could almost mathematically show where they, logically show where they come from point A to point B or whatever, but the die roll wouldn't show it. And they just could not fathom. Nobody's that stupid to disbelieve, blah, blah, blah. Like, have you been around humans?
Yeah.
like people, I mean, there's still people who believe in flat Earth. I mean, hopefully it's not one of you guys, but but there's still people there are just some people who are impossible to convince one way or the other, no matter how articulate you happen to be. It just isn't going to happen. So that's why we have a die roll. Well, good stuff. Let's move on to the last super chat here. Hungar the Star Varian for $10. Thank you very much for the $10. I love you, Maxi Poo. Aw, baby. There you go. All right. Now my wife is jealous. Oh, does she still have your shirt? I think she does. All right, we appreciate all the super chats tonight. And by the way, I'm still, I'm not putting a lot on the screen here because we're running a little long. We got to get to this next segment. Hopefully, we can have time for a segment 4 today. We'll find out. But there's a lot of great chat going on in there, and I appreciate all of you guys who are yapping back and forth, even if you're disagreeing with me or one of the other panelists. It's been in good spirits today, and I like that. It's, we've had a couple weeks where people were a little grumpier than they need to be. So. Now we are, with that taken care of, we're going to move into our final question topic here, which is choosing between old school, modern play, or a hybrid of some sort. And now we're going to meet Dean for the first time, who's been an absolutely fantastic panelist tonight. So happy he accepted to be on here and he joined. I look forward to, hopefully he wants to come back. But Dean, who are you? What content do you create? And what is your tabletop RPG experience?
Okay, I'm Dean. I've created a system called Untold Destiny, which is just coming out of its final test and going into we're doing a complimentary adventure that will be out in a month or 2, so people can get their hands on it and give it a try. The tagline is classic roleplay reimagined, because I love the classic roleplays of old, 2nd edition, basic. But I also like some of the more modern ways of doing mechanics. So I've kind of taken the best of both worlds and merged them together to create something that is a game I want to run, and is a game that all my players so far have absolutely loved playing.
That's also one of the things I've learned in the whole game design concept is when you make a game for yourself and not for the masses, it has a lot more heart and soul, and it tends to be more fun. Even if somebody doesn't necessarily like every aspect, it tends to be more fun because there is that love and that aspect you put into it that it's yours. It's not just corporate, so to speak.
Yeah. I got disappointed with 5th Ed, and I wanted a game that I could run as a very character-focused, story-driven, campaign-based gameplay. But I have been solo role-playing since 83, and I've been playing D&D since 87. So what, 49 years? 39 years, sorry. 39 years. My maths is terrible. So almost hit the 40. But I have been a forever DM, running things like basic AD&D, Torg, which is a great system, Star Wars, the D6 version, Shadowrun, and you'll be glad to hear an amazing campign in Earth Dawn.
Oh,
love.
We're going to be friends, but what edition? What edition of Earth Dawn?
1st edition.
Okay, I've got thoughts on 2nd and 3rd, but I like 1st and 4th. We'll have to talk after the stream. That's awesome. But you said Torg, and that's a game I've only played once. I played it in the 90s, and I wish I would have picked it up when I played it, but I was
it's an amazing, very unique system, and it was great. I've also played run Palladium, as well as then all the editions of D&D and Pathfinder, of which Pathfinder broke me, and I needed 3 months off to recover.
You're new here, so you don't know, but whenever you mention Earthbound, you got to take a drink.
Yeah, it's a drinking game on the channel.
I'll save up the drinks and take them after.
All right. Well, I will seriously get sidetracked with Earth Dawn. So I'm going to ask you the question I'm supposed to ask you now, which is when a game master wants to commit to old school play, embrace modern conventions, or build a deliberate hybrid, what do you see as the real strengths and weaknesses of each approach for things like engagement, pacing, danger level, yada, yada, yada?
Okay. I think we have touched upon all of this through the questions.
Yeah, the third question is usually a good wrap-up question.
Yeah. But I would say if you're after something that is more world-oriented, so in other words, the world is your playing field. The players are merely pieces within that world, and those pieces can be swapped out when they die and new pieces brought in. If it's more about exploring dungeons or hex crawling, there can be some story play in it, but quick characters, because it's the excitement is all about finding what's in that world, having those dice rolled to see what random encounters you come up against, and seeing how you take on the challenges. I'd say a more old school approach. Combats are going to be quicker, character creation's quicker, but your characters can die just as quick. If you're after something that's more character focused, more hero based, more story driven, I would say more modern systems, but they tend to have their own baggage, which is characters are either alive or dead. It's more of a binary system, and often it's more you're alive. I'd hate to say it's hard to kill characters in modern systems, but it's hard to kill characters in modern systems. You can get away with doing a lot because the systems are focused more about balance encounter balance and stuff like that. It's more about the DM creating a balanced story that doesn't quite guarantee the characters, but drives the character in a certain direction, where character death is a rare thing that happens. You've got to find what works best for you, and there are a lot of systems out there, a lot of indie systems. We do a indie spotlight on our YouTube channel, where we just get indie creators in and just drill down into their systems, ask them all these questions. There are so many systems that are a little bit of old school, a little bit of modern, stuff in between. My view is, if you're looking to run a game and you've played in several games, which one did you enjoy the most? That's probably the one you want to run. If you haven't found something you really enjoy, get out there, find people running different games, even if it's on platforms like Roll20, and play them. And find the one that you think, actually, this clicks with me. This is something I like. I like the way the characters are created. I like the styling of the game. I like the pacing of the game. Yeah, I think I can run this. And that would be my advice, because boiling it down to just old school or modern, again, it's that kind of you're two ends of a pendulum, and there's so much in the middle that's available, that's out there. Just, get out, experience it, buy rule books, read the rule books, see what you like, what you don't like, and go from there.
Since you are here, though, on the more new school or story gaming, or whatever term we're supposed, player first side of the fence in this one, if a game master is going to fully commit to that style of play, what is the biggest strength he gains, and what is the biggest risk he assumes?
I'd say the biggest strength is, I feel it's more of a cohesive game that has more continuity through it, in that you haven't got the challenge of having players constantly dying and bringing new players in. There should always be the threat of death. There should always be the threat of failure through the game. If you remove that, then the game changes completely. But my advice would be, focus. The strength you're gaining is being able to focus on the story, albeit you might have an idea of the arc, but then treat it as very much individual chapters going forward, and then let the player's actions decide what the next chapter is going to be. And then you make it very player driven. Understand what your world's doing, but let the players guide that story in the way that they want to. What you will gain running a more modern system is, as I said, it's more that stability of play. And I think your players they get used to their characters, and so they're not swapping out characters. If you're new players, I'd say that's probably one of the better routes to go down, although there are some advantages going down an OSR route. But I'd say start probably with a more modern system, because you've got a little bit more stability, a little more continuity. You can make a few more mistakes in the way you run the game without it derailing everything and making your players hate you.
And then what about what do you think the risks of the more modern style is?
The risk is players getting bored because they're not being challenged. Because you're playing it safe, you're keeping things at a low level. The players begin to realize they can't fail, or the risk of death isn't there, or their dice begin to not matter. If you fall into that trap, so the plot is more important than the players, the driving the story is more important than losing a player, and it's a very easy mistake to make. You have the chosen one in the party. This chosen one has been prophesied, and then the chosen one does something really stupid and dies, and now you're stuck in this, oh, well, where do I go from here? Because the whole story hinges around this chosen one, and the chosen one's just died. So now I've got to come up with a way of bringing the chosen one back. And then the player begins to go, hang on, I'm immortal. And at that point, you fall into the biggest trap of a very character-driven, character-focused, story-driven gameplay. It's that art of being able to have a story. The story can end if all the players die, but then a new story can spawn from that, because the world still continues, and a bunch of new people come in and they kind of pick up, or they deal with the aftermath, and it's what I consider taking the best of OSR, which is the world is what matters. The simulation of the world, your exploring of the world continues regardless of what the players do. and then laying that over the story-driven, character-focused, story-driven modern systems. So the camera's on the player, but the world is what matters, and the world continues. So if the players die, you're ready then to pick it up and continue the story of that world with new players. So yeah, don't fall into the trap. Don't make your players immortal. Don't think the plot is more important than player death. The players have to feel that there is a risk of failure, there is a risk of death. If they don't, that's the biggest risk you've got.
What do you guys think, Doc, Sean?
I'm in favor of the hybridization route as well. I mean, I wouldn't go full OSR, full war game. I do like, characters or players playing their characters, making character choices as opposed to I'm trying to win a game. Things like that are great. And yeah, even having an overarching narrative is fine. As I said earlier, so long as players can quit, they can back out. Not something you have to force them through, because there's obviously benefits to both philosophies. But I lean towards the older style of play because I like, as you said, the living, breathing world. The players are in the simulationist world. They're engaging with the world. Their actions may or may not have consequences to the world, but that all depends on what happens. So yeah, that's where I lean. I think in terms of pros and cons. The obvious con of older style play or troop style like I play is players might not get invested because like I said, if they're constantly dying, I mean that'll eventually stop. Players learn, so especially if they have early deaths, they learn real hard. They don't touch that fire again, but they might not get as invested, or if they're more interested in the story game, the more modern style. They might tune out if their characters aren't as important. But players who are invested in the world and seeing what comes, they will dive right in, and you'll have them for life. So part of that is your what your players are looking for as well. But definitely, you gotta pick and choose the best of both worlds and put it into your game.
I would say for me, it's be well versed in a range of games, even things you aren't necessarily thinking about playing. Read a lot of different stuff because you will find interesting things. Like a lot of the old school games have a very intensive resource management, which is something I love. I think that creates a wonderful tension there. And then you have a lot of new games like, oh, you roll every time you shoot an arrow to see if you still have it. That drives me absolutely up the wall. But I mean, that's a personal taste. You might not want to keep the records. Personally, I don't see a problem with keeping track of their arrows right along next to their hit points, but I'm weird that way. The old school games have a lot to offer. A lot of stuff has been kind of fallen by the wayside in a lot of the newer games, which I think people would be well served to be informed on. But again, I'm very much a hybrid guy. Be well read across.
So what you're saying is you two failed me by one of you not being purist old school.
I never made that problem.
Yeah. That's true. That's fair. I figured the two of you together though would pretty much encapsulate. I think you did. I only really have one minor follow-up that you guys didn't address already sometime through the stream. So we'll start, obviously Dean, this is your segment. So we'll start with you on this one. Is just which approach do you think is more forgiving for inexperienced game masters and why?
That's a difficult one. If the players are going in realizing that their characters can die quite quickly, and the DM's learning, and I think the OSR is probably more forgiving because character death is more accepted. So if you mess up as a DM, you randomize the combat encounter, it kills the whole party. Everybody's like, oh, well, let's roll up some new characters. And I think that's a more forgiving thing than if you've run the story and players are very invested, and then you mess up, you do something really stupid, and it causes the campaign to crash to a halt. I think players are more resistant to that they're more, they'll look at that and be, well, all that time was wasted. So I think when you're learning how to run a game, I think the OSRs are, as much as I think that's probably more forgiving because character death's more accepted within that system. So you can make mistakes. And I'm actually really glad that I learned how to DM under those systems, because I made a lot of mistakes. And you could kind of
when you
live
say
with them.
mistake, what do you mean by that?
Bad calls on certain things, or I would come up with what I thought was a fun encounter, and it ended up just being awful, and just railroading you didn't have a lot of guidance when it came to balancing combat encounters. So when you're trying to think of something that's really a great combat encounter for the party to enjoy, and you get those numbers slightly wrong, or you make a bad judgment, and suddenly it's a party wipe. It's those sort of mistakes, and also introducing things into the world. So an item, magic item, you think, oh, this will be fun. Drop it into the world, and all of a sudden you got a player who's incredibly powerful, and then you're stuck with this. How do we deal with this? And again, I think under the OSR, I think you're able to recover from your mistakes, or the players are more accepting of you saying, look, it is a mistake. Let's start again. Whereas if players have invested hours in a character and you're saying, I've made a mistake, let's start again, the players are going to feel a little bit cheated at that. And they're going to be thinking, well, we just spent, months and months playing these characters. This character's so important to me. I've got a backstory. I've got a name. I can visualize it in this world. And now you're telling me that because of a mistake you've made. Yeah. So I think the OSR is slightly more forgiving.
The
go
thing
ahead, Sean.
I'll add to that is storytelling is a skill, and a new gamer or a new DM, even somebody who's an experienced writer and understands story structure, isn't necessarily going to be able to adapt it to a game situation, and they'll make mistakes or they'll railroad or et cetera. So yeah, I think older systems like something like basic D&D is a perfect starting point. You have quick characters to make. I played in a game of Old School Essentials a few years back with a brand new DM to OSE. He'd played 5e, but he had found adapting to OSE was really easy, and even as he was learning, it was like, oh, he was getting it really fast. So yeah, no, definitely easier to get into a more older school style of play and work yourself up to telling a story if that's ultimately the kind of game you want to play.
Yeah, the dice kind of tell the story for you in OSR, and then
Yep.
you can start to embellish and start to build on that.
So the term that I really like to use here is emergent storytelling. The storytelling, the story emerges from the gameplay.
Yeah.
I think if
talking
I was gonna, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, you're saying my thing now. Emergent. That's where I live.
If I was going to recommend somebody wanted to learn to run a game, I would absolutely point them towards either OSE or Basic Fantasy. Simple to learn, difficult to master. So you get to flex those muscles. You get to develop that stuff. It's an easy thing to pick up and basically run, but it forces you to make decisions and figure things out on your own, as opposed to newer games, which are a lot more technically complicated. And it's very easy to get lost in the weeds there because you're.
And Basic Fantasy is free.
It's free.
And Basic Fantasy is absolutely free. That's the game. If somebody was like, I want to learn to run a game, that's what I would point them towards. Because it's very simple to basically get a handle on what's going on, but it also forces you to develop the muscles you're going to need, because you're going to have to make judgment calls along the way.
Yeah, it's a great way of cutting your teeth, and then when you're ready, and you'll know when you're ready, you can move on to a more complicated system or something else. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that this has been an amazing discussion. I had a lot of fun doing this. I think we're getting ready to go into segment 4 here, where things get dangerous and people can call in. Before we do that, though, become a Legion of Myth channel member. You're going to want to, because we got about another hour left of this show. Well, after the call-ins, that's for members only, sort of, kind of. I'll explain that later. But so become a channel member by hitting that join button. You can also support after the live stream. If you're watching right now, you're like, that was a good time. This Dean fella's pretty cool, and I'm glad that Sean's back. And well, Doc, we're just getting used to you. No, but and you want to donate $5, $10, $20 for a super thanks. that would be appreciated as well. It really helps us know that you truly like this content and want more of it. So in segment 4, we bring you in to talk to our panelists about tonight's topic. Remember, it has to be about tonight's topic. Post a link to join in just a moment. Just remember, I'll try to get to everyone I can, but I will prioritize members and super chatters first because, they kind of paid for that. But we haven't run into a situation where it's been a problem yet. And I'll have more rules for you guys in a moment, but I don't think there were any super chats during that segment. I didn't star anything either. So, again, folks have been talking in there about some great games out there. Talislanta, RuneQuest, Castles and Crusades, a few others that were mentioned. There's a lot of good games that they're suggesting for folks out there. Great conversation going on. I am reading it, just, only so much time to do things. So I guess we're going to kind of skip the super chats because we don't really have much. We're going to jump into segment 4. So with that, it's time. Let me put the link in. Let me hit the link out here for you guys. This is the link to join. But note, got a couple rules for this. It's time for segment 4 where you can have your say. Before anyone jumps in the panel here, I need to remind you of a few things. If you don't want to get booted and possibly banned, do not break YouTube's terms of service. Don't come in here and start spouting off random words that you're not supposed to say. Stay on topic. Unless someone specifically super chats more time for you, you have 5 minutes maximum for your back and forth with the panelists. And by the way, you're here to talk to the panelists, not tell me you hate my show, love my show, or anything like that. I will kick you off if you do that. You're here for to talk to the panelists, not to me. But make your point quickly, and no matter what, the show is a hard stop at 2 hours and 30 minutes. We got about 25 minutes right now in order to do this, and there we go. So did I put the link out there? I did put the link out there on both sides. So if you guys want to start popping in, please do so. And they stepped away for just a moment. They've been sitting here for a couple hours. They got to go, get a snack, pee, drink, water, whatever else. So I'll let them.
Stream started, so I'm comfy for a bit.
I was in 6th grade and I got in trouble for something and I got suspended from recess and so forth. Like I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I had to write sentences or whatever the heck it was I was forced to do.
Expectation, what we called them. Yes.
A teacher came in and was like, you've got 5 minutes. You want to go to the bathroom? I'm like, no, I don't need to go. He's like, well, do you have cast iron kidneys or something? I never see you go. And I'm like, just my entire life. I'm that guy that goes like twice a day and that's it. I'm done. If I go more than that, I got to go to the doctor. And then that burning sensation kicks in. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
But
you're in your 50s now. You'll be getting more and more familiar with the bathroom.
Oh, probably. Yeah. Well, we'll see. So far, so good. But, you're probably right. So, again, the link is out there for folks. I have that StreamYard link that you see. That is for you guys to jump in here. And, I'm not going to wait forever and bore everybody. So if nobody jumps in anytime soonish, then I'll probably call this and we'll just end up moving to the members only portion of the stream. And since I've got... Right? And since I've got time for that, just so you know, I think... Don't quote me on this, but I think everybody can watch, not on the Rumble side, but on the YouTube side, I think everybody can watch the members only portion. You just can't chat or something, but it's also cut out of the final version anyway and left to members only in the live stream. But I think some people said as long as you don't go, move away from the channel, you can still watch somehow, even though I set it to members only.
You let it run, but if you click away from the stream, you can't go back.
Okay, fair enough.
I tried on yours last month. So.
Yeah, I did that other option where it literally switches it, but that gives a new link. That caused all types of problems. I would rather have people be able to kind of sit quietly in the back and go, haha, look at me. I get to see members' content. I'd rather that than go through all the other hassle. So,
just know if you're doing that, you're a horrible person.
Yeah. Naughty. And you know why he says that? Because he's a member, and that's kind of taken away from the little bit that we give him. Oh, Paladin becomes a member. He's going to get to watch more. Thank you very much for that new member. We got somebody who popped in to talk to you guys. And you know what I didn't do? Hold on a second.
You didn't vet.
I got to change this to the right layout for you to pop in. And it's that one right there. And banner. And that banner right there. See, I should have done that. Now Lord Mattias can pop in and say his piece. Welcome, Lord Mattias. Thank you for the super chat earlier. And what do you have to say to the guys out here?
Number one, excellent conversation. It was very, very cool stuff. I wanted to clarify my super chat from earlier. The Rule of the Ming Vase comes from Finch's OSR primer, where you have
Oh.
like this really crazy fight, let's say with orcs in a room, a dungeon or whatever, and in that room is a table with a priceless Ming vase on it. What's going on with that? And so like are the orcs bumping into it, and this thing that could be worth of a lot of XP, i.e. gold piece, is gonna fall? Is a goblin gonna jump on it, grab it, and smash it on the fighter's head? Is the fighter gonna grab it and smash it into an orc's head? Like I'm trying to encourage my players to engage with the environment in combat, not just in exploration and in social encounters. So I was just wondering what you guys thought about that.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the
Or
best
not.
ways to do that is to have the NPCs do that stuff. Because once they see it, they take it as a cue. Like have somebody, jump behind the table, grab one of the candelabras and throw it at them. Once they see the NPCs are using environmental objects, they'll be encouraged to do that. It's like if they're like, have them try a disarm maneuver. Oh, we can do that. Oh, yes, absolutely. Have the NPCs you're fighting do that, because that's going to make them want to get in on it.
I agree totally. I'm just bad at implementing it. There's so much you're thinking about in a game when you're running it, and it's like, oh man, totally forgot to have the NPC grab that vase or whatever. But I always think I'm going to do it. I'm going to garnish. I'm going to add the garnish, but then I never end up getting to do it. So I'm bad. I'm terrible.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I tried to spice up combat encounters with stuff like that, things within the environment or things that are slightly unusual, so it's not just a stand-up fight. But like Sean, I'm typically bad at it. It's one of the reasons I've developed my own game, is because DM fatigue is something I've coined. And that's when you're running a game and there's just too much to think about, too many things, too many parts, and it's simplifying that.
Yeah, you're doing math and keeping
Yeah,
track
exactly.
who's taking
And
too long. Yeah, it's
3.5 was really bad. Pathfinder was even worse, which is why I had to take 3 months off, because it was just too many numbers in the back end. But I absolutely agree with that. I think that's fantastic advice, and it just spices up the encounter. And the more theatre of the mind you actually use for your combat environment, you mention the key things, you have them jotted down in your combat sheet. These things can be interacted with, so you describe them. And then I think, Doc, your idea, an NPC come along and use them. Brilliant. I think the two combined. Yeah, I'm going to take that away, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, I was in an OSC game a little while back, and I was trying to be like, the good OSR fighter guy, and we were fighting in a room with some stalagmites or whatever, and I tried to position myself, I described it, between two of these towering columns of rock with my shield in an effort to kind of create a wall. And I thought I did a really nice job describing it, but the game master, I mean, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't great. He's just like, oh, well, they walk around the wall and hit you. I'm like, I was just trying to telegraph this awesome thing, and we're reduced to swing, hit, damage, swing, hit. So, but anyway,
that's when I stop combat. When I start noticing that that's what everybody's doing, that's when, I don't believe in pacing. I think it's a game. There's no such thing as pacing, but that is when that word makes sense to me. It's like, okay, nobody's really invested or immersed or whatever anymore. Okay, it's time to end this somehow. Either these things have less hit points, time to start making react or morale check, something. I've got to do something to make this combat now come to a conclusion, when they're just like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's narrative pacing, and then there's what I like to call table flow, right? Like the table flow just means everybody's engaged at the table. So if a 1 minute combat takes 4 hours to accomplish in real time, but the table flow is there, then you won't feel it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't affect narrative pacing, because from the narrative perspective, it only took a minute to resolve that combat in context.
Yeah.
All right, Lord Mattias, you got about a minute left. Anything? Oh, go ahead, just 1 second.
Sorry,
you got about a minute left, Lord Mattias. Let Dean speak, and then if there's any last comments you want to make, otherwise I've got to let you go.
Yeah. Lord Mattias, I've been in that situation where players have done something like that, and I've looked at the map and gone, well, actually, strictly, and then I've just ignored it, as in ignored what the map says, and played to the player, because it brings a player out, makes them feel special, and tactically it just works nicely. And the rest of the party, then, you're up front, you're protecting them, and the rest of the party go, oh, well done, and they're now behind you, supporting you. And that creates that cohesion you need in the party to get some great role play and to get some great tactics.
It's that kind of flexibility is why I prefer theater of the mind, even in combat. Yes, I will occasionally draw quickly if there is some confusion, but I actually try to avoid the minis. I think it slows things down, and I lose that flexibility. Before I go, I just want to say, Max, I'd love to have you on the show again sometime, and all three of you guys, I want to have you on my show. So anyway, you guys have a great weekend. This was a great conversation. Bravo.
Have a great night. Thank you,
man. Have a good night.
And I think that all three of these guys should jump on his show at some point. I had a fun time when I was over there.
I pop in sometimes in chat, but he usually starts at something like 11 o'clock.
Yeah, it is pretty late. Drink some coffee. Oh, Dean, that would kill you, man. I'm like, well, I don't know. If you go to bed early, you actually could probably just wake up early for his show.
I probably could. As I said, I really do shows that start at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. And I was on Dungeon Delver. I attended his show. That was 2 o'clock in the morning. So I went to bed, woke up, and then went back to bed again.
Yeah, when I lived in Germany, I had that problem a lot, and I was there for quite a while. This is actually really good. I like to listen to the party's conspiracies. Always be great to add to the yes.
Absolutely.
And I like doing it even in the red herring aspect of it, where start throwing those little bits out there. One of my favorite things to do, and I've talked about this before, is I like them to come up with their own wives' tales, or the really quick example is the pot of gold under the rainbow, right? Is it real? Is it not? Well, unless you go check it out, you don't know. But I like them to come up with their own, and then I determine as time goes on if it's real, if there's rumors, whatever. I can tailor around that. And sometimes they're like, oh my God, I was just saying this and I didn't know it was a real thing. Like, yeah, you can do that. Other times be like, oh, we put all that effort into it just to find out it was a stupid wives' tale.
Yeah, I got a player who he likes to come up with the conspiracy theories in real life and in the game. and I don't use that as prompts to make it real, but I let him talk them out of courses of action that would be beneficial because they're so afraid.
That is kind of funny. You guys did it to yourselves. To me, that's good role playing, though, too. I mean, like, I will absolutely encourage it in role playing. If they know that they have to get the MacGuffin and somehow he talks them out of doing the MacGuffin, you're like, All right, well, I'm not seeing anybody else jump in, and I don't want to waste everybody's time. So I think we're going to jump on over to the members-only version. So real quickly for folks like, what does that mean? What does members-only mean? Well, we give about another hour for the members. I jump in a little more. Sometimes you guys think I jump in too much already as is, because I write down notes during this, and there are a couple more things that I would like to add to this. And sometimes we also bring in another person or two. We'll see. I'm trying to tone that down a little bit to let our panelists continue that conversation more, but it also allows them to say poo-poo words if they want to. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Things get weird sometimes in the members only, but with that, yeah, I don't have. Do I have anything else to say? Let me make sure. I got to go look at my. Yeah, I do have an outro here. Okay, that's it for tonight's Game Masters Insight. Please leave a comment of who you believe had the most compelling, interesting, or novel position. Did you learn anything new that you may try at your table? Let us know in the comments. YouTube members, there is more to come, so don't go anywhere. Sincere thank you to everyone who supported the show with super chats, rumble rants, and memberships, and to all of you who took the time to join us tonight. And I mean that sincerely. As those of you who've been kind of following the channel and some of the posts that I've been making and Substack posts and so forth, know that I'm being a little bit more open about everything from like analytics and the future of Legion of Mist, so on and so forth. I don't care. I've had a few people say, look, I can't afford to give you money. This is not a demand. I absolutely appreciate your time, your money, etc. But there are also realities of me being a business owner of things that I need to do. So, but this is never a knock on anybody else. Support your family, not me. Okay. With that said, you got that extra 20 burning a hole in your pocket, right? You can just let the cash fly, maybe. But finally, thank you very much to tonight's panelists for their time and for their informative and, well, not so spirited tonight. I think it was just informative discussion tonight. I think everybody's on good behavior tonight. I like that. We bring in a Brit and look what happens. Everybody puts on their suits and, it starts talking all pleasantly. I like this. Be sure to subscribe to their channels. Check out their websites. Links are in the description. With that, I look forward to doing this again next time.